The lights were blinding. The cameras were rolling. And in the middle of it all, two quarterbacks stepped onto the field, knowing this wasn't just another game. It was the game. On one side, Shedeur Sanders, the calm, calculated presence of the cannon for an arm and ice in his veins. On the other, Dillon Gabriel, the fiery, scrappy competitor who had been used to being the center of attention. By the time the dust settled, it wasn't just the scoreboard that told the story. It was the body language, the composure, or lack of it, and the way the spotlight seemed to drift. If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed. Almost effortlessly, from Gabriel to Sanders. And in the end, Gabriel wasn't just beaten. He was shaken. From the first drive, Shedeur Sanders looked like he'd been here before. Smooth in the pocket, reading defenses like they were an open book, hitting passes with laser precision. It wasn't flashy for the sake of it. It was clinical. You could tell he wasn't chasing highlights. He was orchestrating them. Each throw felt like a statement. Each completion, another nail in Gabriel's grip on the game. Gabriel, on the other hand, started solid enough. He had the energy, the swagger, the arm talent. But the more Sanders carved at the defense, the tighter Gabriel seemed to grip the football. His reads got slower, his footwork less certain. It was like he could feel the attention shifting, and instead of blocking it out, he let it eat at him. And you know how it goes. Once frustration starts creeping in, it doesn't just stay in your head. It leaks into your throws, your decisions, your sideline demeanor. Gabriel's passes started sailing high. His timing with receivers went off, and you could almost see the panic setting in. Meanwhile, Shedeur was playing kind of football that makes scouts drool. Pocket collapsing, step up and deliver a dart. Coverage tight, thread it in there like he's playing backyard catch. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't forcing anything. He was controlling the tempo, letting the defense tire itself out trying to chase him. By halftime, the crowd knew what they were watching. This wasn't just a strong performance. It was a takeover. Every highlight package rolling on the big screen featured Shedeur's throws, Shedeur's drives, Shedeur's command of the game. And you could tell Gabriel felt it. That's when the tension started to boil over. Early in the second half, after yet another Sanders-led drive ended in points, the two quarterbacks crossed paths. Cameras caught it. Gabriel giving Shedeur a hard shove as they brushed shoulders. It didn't spark a brawl, but it was enough to light up social media instantly. The clip was everywhere. People paused it, slowed it down, debated whether it was just football or a full-on frustration move. Either way, the shove told you everything you needed to know about where Gabriel's head was at. This wasn't competitive fire in its pure form. It was the body language of a player who knew the spotlight wasn't his anymore. And from there, the meltdown accelerated. Gabriel forced throws into double coverage. He started jawing at his own receivers after incompletions. You could see him on the sideline, helmet off, pacing, shaking his head, occasionally slamming his hands against his thighs. That composure quarterbacks are supposed to have? Gone. Shedeur, meanwhile, stayed unbothered. Even after taking a couple hits, he kept getting up, calmly adjusting his wristband, and going back to work. No trash talk, no gestures to the crowd, just execution. And that poise, that quiet confidence, was what made the difference. Because when your leader stays calm, the team stays calm. And when your leader unravels, well, we saw what happened on the other sideline. The more Gabriel pressed, the more the game slipped away from him. His mechanics broke down. His deep shots turned into overthrows. Even his short passes lacked touch. Every missed opportunity just made the frustration worse, and the cameras caught every grimace, every shake of the head, every time he avoided eye contact with teammates. By the final quarter, the scoreboard didn't even matter anymore. The real story was playing out in real time. Shedeur Sanders had taken over the narrative. The commentators were openly asking if this was a game that would push Sanders ahead in the draft conversation. Gabriel, who had been considered the more NFL-ready of the two coming in, suddenly looked like the one with the bigger question marks. And make no mistake, The NFL world notices this stuff. Talent matters, sure, but so does composure. Scouts pay attention to body language, leadership, and the ability to handle adversity. In that department, Shedeur passed with flying colors. Gabriel? He gave them red flags the size of the stadium. The post-game scenes only made it worse for Gabriel. Sanders was swarmed by cameras, teammates hugging him, reporters throwing questions his way. He handled it all with that same smooth, measured tone he had on the field, talking about the team effort, giving credit to his offensive line, never taking the bait to gloat about the personal victory. Gabriel? He slipped away quickly, helmet on, head down, straight to the locker room without shaking many hands. When reporters caught up with him later, the answers were short, clipped, and edged with irritation. No self-reflection. No acknowledgement of being outplayed. Just frustration spilling over into defensiveness. And here's the thing. This wasn't just about stats. Gabriel didn't lose the game solely because Sanders threw better passes. He lost because when the moment got big, he made it about himself. He fought the narrative instead of fighting for the next play. Sanders, on the other hand, seemed immune to the noise. The internet had a field day. Memes of Gabriel's sideline frustration went viral. Clips of the shove looped endlessly with captions like, "When the spotlight leaves you mid-game," and "Jealousy, Yexia stopped working." Meanwhile, Sanders was getting highlight montages with dramatic music and slow-motion shots of perfect spirals. It's wild how fast the public perception can flip. Coming into this matchup, Gabriel was the name people were watching. By the end, the question wasn't, can Shedeur Sanders catch him? It was, has Gabriel already been passed? And maybe that's what stings the most for Gabriel. It's one thing to lose a game. It's another to lose your grip on a narrative. In sports, that can be even harder to get back. This game felt like a changing of the guard. A symbolic moment where the cool, unflappable newcomer outshines the established name. You could feel in the way fans talked after the game, in the way the media framed their stories. Sanders wasn't just impressive for his age anymore. He was a legitimate threat to leapfrog Gabriel in the NFL draft conversation. Gabriel, meanwhile, now has to carry the label of the guy who couldn't handle it. Fair or not, that's how sports culture works. People remember the meltdowns as much as the comebacks. And unless he finds a way to shake this off and put together some flawless performances, that moment, the shove, the sideline frustration, the unraveling will follow him. In the end, Shedeur Sanders didn't just win a football game. He won the moment, the crowd, and the narrative. He showed that poise isn't just a nice-to-have trait. It's the difference between leading a team and losing one. He made it clear that no matter how bright the lights get, he's not blinking. And Gabriel? Well, sometimes the hardest opponent you face isn't across the line of scrimmage. It's standing right next to you, smiling calmly while the spotlight shifts in their direction, and you can't do a thing to stop it. This wasn't just a quarterback duel. It was a statement. And Shedeur Sanders made sure everyone heard it loud and clear. By the time the clock hit 0, the contrast between the two quarterbacks was almost cinematic. Shedeur Sanders walked off the field like he just finished a business meeting. Calm handshake to the opposing coach. Helmet tucked neatly under his arm. A quiet nod to crowd. No showboating. No lingering for extra applause. Just the image of a man who'd done the job he came to do. Dillon Gabriel, on the other hand, looked like someone who'd been in a bar fight and lost. Shoulders hunched, helmet still on, eyes darting anywhere but toward the cameras. It wasn't just defeat on his face. It was embarrassment, the kind that doesn't fade overnight. And that's the thing. Games like this don't just end when the final whistle blows. The echo of what happened lingers. The tape gets studied by coaches and scouts. The clips get dissected on sports talk shows. Fans debate it in comment sections. Every small detail becomes part of the story. And in this case, the story was that Sanders didn't just beat Gabriel. He dismantled him on every front. Physically, mentally, and in the court of public opinion. What stood out most was how unbothered Shedeur remained, even as Gabriel's frustration boiled over. When Gabriel shoved him, Sanders didn't shove back. He didn't even jaw at him. He just gave a quick glance, turned his helmet back toward his sideline, and got ready for the next drive. That's the difference between being in control of a game and being controlled by it. You could almost see the mental chess match playing out. For every calm completion Sanders threw, Gabriel seemed to press a little harder, desperate for his own highlight moment. For every poised reaction Sanders showed after a hit, Gabriel seemed to wear his emotions more openly, letting the opponent and the cameras see his frustration. And in football, especially a quarterback, perception is half the battle. It's not like Gabriel didn't have opportunities. The play calls gave him chances to answer back, to put together a statement drive. But the problem with trying to force a statement is that you start ignoring the fundamentals. He'd rush his dropbacks, try to hit deep routes that weren't open, or fire bullets on checkdowns that needed touch. Instead of resetting, he spiraled. And once a quarterback starts spiraling, it's hard to stop. Meanwhile, Sanders didn't just maintain composure. He elevated as the game wore on. His reads got sharper. His decision-making sped up. By the fourth quarter, you got the sense that he could see the defense shifting before they even moved. He wasn't just reacting to the game. He was dictating it. That's the kind of control you expect from veterans, not from someone still climbing the ladder. And that's why this night hit so differently. It wasn't just about one player being better statistically. It was about the way they carried themselves when the stakes got high. Shedeur for Foreman said, "I belong here. I'm not going anywhere." Gabriel's reaction, fair or not, said, "I'm rattled." Off the field, the fallout started almost instantly. The social media split screen became a running joke. On one side, Sanders calmly throwing a perfect strike. On the other, Gabriel throwing his hands up at a teammate or pacing on the sideline. Commentators started using words like composure gap and mental separation to describe the difference between the two. And you know what the kicker is? Gabriel came into the game with more hype, more pedigree in the draft conversation, more eyes expecting him to put on a show. Instead, he became the supporting character in someone else's highlight reel. That's the worst kind of loss in sports. You don't just lose the game, you lose control of your own story. For Shedeur, this was the kind of win that does more than pad the stat sheet. It changes how people talk about you. Before, he was in the conversation as a promising young QB with potential. After this, he's a guy who stared down a higher-rated prospect, outplayed him, and stayed cool while the other guy cracked under pressure. And in the NFL world, that matters. Scouts and GMs know that physical talent is only part of the equation. The other part, the harder part, is whether you can keep your head when the entire stadium is watching you either sink or swim. Sanders swam. Gabriel flailed. The shove incident, though it's going to stick, you can't unsee it. Even if Gabriel meant it as a harmless brush, the optics screamed something else. In slow motion, it looked like a quarterback taking a cheap shot because he couldn't win the duel the right way. In a sport obsessed with image and leadership, that's a bad look. By the post-game pressers, the tone was set. Sanders was fielding questions about his poise, his preparation, how he reads defenses. Gabriel, he was answering questions about whether the shove was intentional and how he planned to bounce back from an emotional game. That's not the narrative you want to be stuck with. And here's the hard truth. Recovering from performance like this isn't just about playing better next week. It's about repairing the perception that you can't handle adversity. Once that seed gets planted in the media and among scouts, it grows fast. And if Gabriel doesn't put together a string of games where he's the one stealing the spotlight, this will be the moment people point to when they say, "That's when the doubt started." For Sanders, it's the opposite. This is a launch pad. When you perform like this against a respected opponent, people remember. When you keep your cool while the other guy unravels, it becomes part of your brand. Fans start seeing you as a leader. Teammates trust you more. And those moments of trust, they show up on the field, too. The locker room dynamic after the game said it all. Sanders' teammates were buzzing, laughing, celebrating, hyping him up. Gabriel's side was quiet, heads down. The kind of atmosphere where everyone knows the night didn't just end in a loss. It ended with a bruise to the team's collective confidence in their QB. What's wild is that these moments can define careers in ways people don't expect. There are players who have ridden the momentum of one great game for years, and others whose slide started with one visible crack in their armor. This had all the makings of one of those inflection points. The irony? Gabriel probably came into the game thinking he'd be the one making a statement. He'd outgun Sanders, reaffirm his status as the draft darling, and walk away with his stock even higher. Instead, he walked into a perfect storm, an opponent with elite composure, a night where his own mechanics slipped, and a national audience ready to compare every snap. And when those storms hit, you either anchor down or you drift. Sanders anchored. Gabriel drifted. This isn't to say Gabriel can't recover. Plenty of players have. But the thing about public memory is that it's selective. They might forget the final score, but they'll remember the shove. They'll remember the look on his face after a missed throw. They'll remember Sanders calmly walking off the field with the win. And years from now, if Sanders keeps ascending, this game might be remembered as the moment he arrived. Not because of the stats alone, but because of how he owned the moment while his opponent lost it. The final irony? Sanders never needed to gloat. He didn't throw shade in interviews, didn't take jabs at Gabriel. His silence said enough. Because in sports, nothing speaks louder than the scoreboard and the way you carry yourself when it's tilted in your favor. The hours after that game felt almost heavier than the game itself. In the tunnel, you could hear the difference between the two locker rooms before you even stepped inside. On Sanders' side, there was a buzz, low, confident, and full of that post-victory energy that comes from knowing you didn't just win, you proved something. On Gabriel's side, the air was thick, the kind of quiet where you can hear every zipper, every piece of tape being ripped from a wrist, every heavy sigh. Reporters swarmed the hallway, waiting for quotes. Sanders emerged first, and you could tell the cameras loved him. He looked composed, a little tired in the way you want your quarterback to be tired, like he'd given every ounce of energy to the game. No exaggerated grin, no unnecessary theatrics. He answered questions with the same rhythm he'd shown on the field. Steady, deliberate, never giving more than what was necessary, but never dodging. When someone inevitably asked about the incident with Gabriel, Sanders just shook his head. Heat of the game, he said. Stuff happens. I'm focused on my team and what we did right. That was it. No jab, no smirk, no need to keep the fire burning. And in doing so, he made Gabriel's shove look even smaller. Because the surest way to make someone look petty is to refuse to play their game. Gabriel came out much later. You could see it before he even spoke. Jaw tight, eyes still hot. The media didn't get the composed, leader-like quarterback they were hoping for. They got clipped answers, short sentences, and body language that screamed frustration. When the shove came up, he brushed it off with a curt, "I don't want to talk about that." But his tone carried more weight than the words. Everyone knew he was still thinking about it. And here's where the turning point really crystallized. In a single night, two careers took subtly different paths, not just because of what happened on the field, but because of how each quarterback handled the after. Scouts don't just watch film of plays. They watch press conferences, sideline interactions, the way a player responds when things aren't perfect. Sanders looked like someone who could run an NFL huddle tomorrow. Gabriel looked like someone still learning how to lose. Back on the field, though, the signs had been building all game. Sanders' control wasn't just about perfect passes. It was about knowing when not to throw. On a 2nd and long, with pressure closing in, he dumped the ball off to his running back for a modest gain rather than forcing a risky shot. It didn't make the highlight reel, but it kept the drive alive. That's what seasoned quarterbacks do. They protect possessions. They think 2 moves ahead. Gabriel, on the other hand, tried to win it all back in a single throw. Over and over again. Even when the check down was there, even when the smart play was obvious, he went for the deep ball. And when it didn't connect, the frustration grew. It was as if every incompletion was proof to himself that the game was slipping away, which only made him chase harder. By the 3rd quarter, you could see Sanders had sensed it. Quarterbacks talk about smelling blood in the water, and this was one of those moments. Without ever trash-talking, without any overt show of dominance, Sanders leaned into the tempo, extended drives, and kept Gabriel on the sideline just long enough to make him restless. It wasn't just winning, it was psychological control. And the thing about control is, once you've got it, you don't need to shout about it. Sanders never had to match Gabriel's visible frustration. He just had to keep delivering. Every clean pocket read, Every sideline out completed on time. Every third down conversion was like another quiet message. I've got this, and you don't. That message didn't just land with Gabriel. It landed with everyone watching. In the stands, you could feel the momentum shift with each passing series. Chants started leaning Sanders' way. Fans began murmuring after Gabriel's incompletions, that low hum of doubt that every quarterback dreads. By the final whistle, it wasn't about stats anymore. It was about optics. Sanders had the winner look. Gabriel had the what just happened look. And in sports, optics are sticky. They hang around long after the game tape gets filed away. In the days following, the conversation didn't die down. If anything, it grew louder. Sports radio hosts debated whether this was a rival game for Sanders. Analysts broke down his poise on film, praising how he kept his eyes downfield under pressure. Gabriel's tape, meanwhile, was analyzed with surgical precision, pointing out mechanical breakdowns, decision-making flaws, and, of course, that shove. What made the moment so powerful was its symbolism. Quarterback battles aren't just about completions. They're about presence. And presence is what Sanders owned from the first snap to the last. He didn't just play well. He looked like the guy who belonged. That's the sort of intangible that, once you see it, you can't unsee. The locker rooms eventually moved on, because in football, you have to. Games pile up, preparation continues, and dwelling gets you beat next week. But public memory moves differently. Fans will keep replaying the night Sanders outclassed Gabriel for months. Draft scouts will keep that footage bookmarked. And every time Gabriel has a shaky moment in a future game, the narrative will resurface. Remember that night against Sanders? For Sanders, the benefits will compound. A single high-profile performance like that can fast-track a player's reputation. Coaches start trusting you with more complex game plans. Teammates look to you in tight moments. Even opponents take you more seriously. You go from rookie with upside to quarterback who can take over a game almost overnight. For Gabriel, the road back is harder. He'll have to string together multiple composed, dominant performances to erase the image of that night. And even then, there'll always be skeptics who point back to it as evidence that under the biggest lights, he blinked. The truth is, moments like this rarely come down to one bad throw or one good one. They're built across dozens of little decisions. When to throw, when to run, when to lead with words, and when to lead with silence. Sanders mastered that balance. Gabriel fought it. And maybe that's why, in the grand scheme, this game will stick. Because it wasn't just a scoreboard win for Shedeur Sanders. It was a composure clinic. One quarterback played like the stage belonged to him. The other played like he was fighting to stay on it. And when the stage lights are this bright, there's no hiding who you are. That night, we all saw exactly who they were.